welcome to all our viewers and listeners. I'm Ruturaj Bhede, Associate Partner at Dhruva Advisors, and I'm delighted to welcome you for the first session of our GST Day Webcast Series. As many of you know, 1st July marks GST Day, and this year GST completes 9 years. On that occasion, we are bringing you a four-part webcast series where over the coming weeks, we will discuss range of contemporary GST topics from policy developments, litigation trends to technology, compliance, and the road ahead. We thought there could be no better way to begin this series than by taking a step back and reflecting on the journey of GST itself. To discuss this fascinating journey, I am joined by three distinguished panelists, each bringing a unique perspective to this conversation. First, we have Deepak Bahirwani, who's head of the tax function of Cummins Group. Deepak brings first-hand industry experience, having led the business through the entire GST lifecycle from implementation, compliance, audits, litigation, and the strategic tax management. Joining him are my colleagues Ranjit Mahatani and Kulraj Ashnani, partners at Dhruva Advisors. They have been closely associated with GST since inception and have led several significant assignments of advocacy, advisory, litigation, and compliance management. Deepak, Ranjit, Kulraj, a very warm welcome. And let us dive straight into our discussions. I'd like to begin with a very broad question for all three of you. If you were asked to prepare sort of a report card for GST for first 9 years, not necessarily assigning it a score as such, but identifying the defining features of or achievements that stand out for you. So let us start with Deepak, and then we can proceed with Ranjit and Gurraj.
Hey, Rituraj, thank you so much. Hi, Ranjit, hi, Gulraj. So, yes, in terms of reflecting back, in terms of what has happened in the last 9 years, I would say that GST has not been just a tax reform. It has been India's most successful digital governance ecosystem. It has truly built a one nation, one tax, which was envisaged at the time of implementation of GST. And look at numbers. The taxpayer base has increased from roughly around 65 odd lakhs to 1.6465 crore taxpayers as of now. And this is doubled, right? The gross collections have reached a staggering number of 22.27 lakh crore in fiscal year 25-26. And this is a pulse of India's robust economic growth. These are real numbers which have been published by the government. In terms of reflecting back on in a different perspective, I would say that while the government's theme for the 9th GST day, translating it, has been an easy tax system, we in the industry probably know that this easy still requires a lot of relentless internal vigilance. Just to give you an example, we need to keep tracking capital goods and inputs which have been sent to third-party job workers, maybe for painting, molding, etc., and ensuring that they return within the strict statutory timelines, which is 1 year for inputs and 3% for 3 years for capital goods. And this, I'm sure, remains an operational tightrope, not only for people in the tax field, my colleagues, my peers, as well as for plant managers across various companies and industries. So yeah, there's good things. There are certain things which have made life a little bit more tightrope walk, but overall, the report card, I would say, has been good over the past 9 years.
That sounds great. Moving on, Ranjit, one question that comes up is, at the heart of GST was one specific promise that tax should not become a cost to business. So do you think in these 9 years, the GST has been successful in delivering a seamless input tax credit regime?
Thank you, Rituraj. Hello, everyone. Rituraj, before I address it from an ITC perspective, I wanted to make two sort of comments, and perhaps these are slightly broad-based, considering 9 years. So the first one is, I was reading recently, there was a report, survey put out by one of the big four accounting firms, which has pegged the positivity sentiment around GST at a high of 84% now in 2026 from 2022. And in my view, this is a good report card if I was, the person who was assessing it. The second is at a policy level, if you look back, uh, there is quite a bit of receptiveness to feedback to inputs. So you will see a numerous amount of clarity or clarifications issued, which approach the matter and subject on an as is where is basis. And to sort of put an end to litigation, to put in closure to pieces of law that is susceptible to different views, and have a quietus and move on with implementation. Okay, so coming to what you asked, Ruturaj, whether GST has been a sort of able to achieve a seamless credit flow fungibility, and has it really kept its promise up? I think the response is largely yes. There are several aspects that need attention. There are some issues that would require a policy level intervention, but GST was conceptualized as a value-added tax, and where tax should not have become or should not become part of the cost. And in that way, you avoid the cascading. There are quite a few areas which cause concern to industry, to India Inc. So there is by design restrictions that have been provided for in law, and till date, I have not been able to reconcile as to why some of them even exist. For example, in the context of motor car, for example, in the context of certain construction and real estate related activities. These, I think, deserve a policy relook in my view. And it's important that the council and the governments really sit down together and do this a bit quickly. The other aspect of concern which has been there, and it continues to sort of haunt everyone, including burdening our courts, is this angle in section 16(2)(c), which deals with payment to the government for the amount of tax that you as a receiver have paid the supplier vendor. There's differing views, there's different interpretations, and as a country as large as ours, there's obviously going to be varied sort of factual points to see. I think it's important for someone in the council or then the Supreme Court to put it down and conclude it, put the principles in place, and then it sort of apply through the length and breadth of the country. Besides that, I think we've also seen several amendments, whether in respect of the sequence of using and utilizing the credit, the different buckets of it, whether it's in the context of input service distribution being made mandatory, IMS, which is on the anvil. All of these, when you aggregate them together, there's a massive change on the input tax credit framework. And what does that tell you? That tells you that there has been a law which has kept up with the times, which has kept up with business, which has responded to change in circumstances and has upgraded itself. And in that way, I think it's again a B plus, I would say.
All right, all right. I think if ITC is backbone of GST, technology is perhaps the nervous system that keeps the entire framework functioning. So, on that thought, Puraj, I want to bring you in and want to know your thoughts on, has the technology been the GST's biggest success story?
Hi, Raj. So let's. I have one thought that, and I do believe in that legislations are not formed on a coffee table. Their existence and coming into life uh, is a story in itself, and the story needs to be witnessed with patience. And it is a fascinating thing. GST can't be any separate. When we sat in 2017, the government made promises about the return filing system being online, the matching system, while it couldn't be so implemented, the government didn't leave it all that. Government has time and again placed emphasis on technology being at the backbone of the GST systems. Right from 2017, the government has ensured that timely measures are taken to control the transactions, to implement technology, and to better the GST regime per se. The e-way bill was the first one that got introduced, followed by the concept of e-invoicing that came through to ensure that the invoices are well structured and are reported in the GST returns directly. The 2B matching system came into being from 1st of January 2022, which was important again. The government is now focusing on IMS as a measure of reporting and recording the transactions and, in fact, the matching of it. So, therefore, the technology has certainly been the backbone of it. And over the past 9 years, the government has not really burdened the industry by putting all the measures at once. The government has ensured that there are timely updates to it so that industry can react to it. And that has a well structured regime being in there. Transaction volume at the portal is very, very significant. So the GST portal is trying to cope up with, the government is trying to work on technology. And I think the technology shall remain a backbone of the GST regime and will become more important in the times to come.
All right, all right. This sort of also sets a nice context for my next question to Deepak. Deepak, looking back, as Kulraj just talked about the evolution of GST and the e-compliances, so to say. So, from an industry perspective, how has the compliance landscape changed? And more importantly, today, what do you think is the biggest challenge which businesses face from a GST compliance or procedure perspective?
Okay. Yes, I mean, there has been a significant change as far as compliances are concerned. The GSTN has shifted very heavily towards automation with deployment of artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, etc., etc. And there's a lot of risk profiling which is happening. We now have great deal of pre-filled returns which are available. And the tax administration is slowly moving from manual scrutiny to a proactive technology-led governance. But the fact of the matter is that because tax authorities are now armed with all these AI risk indicators, compliant taxpayers sometimes get caught in these algorithmic mismatches, which therefore require a robust, swift internal reconciliation teams, which is good in a way because then it means that we are becoming more value additive. We are transitioning from being merely a reactive box checkers to a proactive risk manager. We are not able to claim ITCs unless the vendors have filed their returns on time. Leads to is that large manufacturers can only be as much compliant as their smallest vendor. It is like a chain, right? I mean, what is the strength of a chain? The strength of a chain is fully dependent on the strength of its weakest link. So yes, compliances have evolved. The landscape has changed. We are facing challenges, but in a way, these challenges are probably bringing out the best on our side so that we can partner the best with the business.
I think that's the best way to look at it. I think that's the best version I've heard of how one is looking at these compliance and increasing compliance in a positive manner. And I think moving on, let's talk about another aspect in GST, which I feel is again really crucial, which is the GST Council. It has played a very big role in how GST has evolved and it has shaped in last 9 years. Puraj, let me bring you here, and I want to know how do you look at GST Council's approach in the last 9 years, and has GST Council been sufficiently responsive to industry's concerns, according to you?
Rudraj, let's try stepping back and understand the requirement of counsel being there. Uh, in earlier regime, we had different legislation and different authorities managing those legislations. GST became, and it came as a quasi-federal structure. Both center and state had powers to monitor it, govern it. The government at that point of time very consciously constituted a constitution body which will act as a gatekeeper to it, which will act as a body which will govern, monitor, and as well as run the GST regime. If that being the objective, the GST Council has fairly done its job well. Over the last 9 years or so, we have seen council meeting almost 56 times, which is fairly significant given the role and the constitution of the council. There have been rationalizations, there have been clarification, there have been procedure changes, which have been numbered in more than 1,000. Please understand the council has been so reactive to the industry concerns that they have been upfront and upbringing when the COVID got introduced. They had introduced COVID related measures. When industry went back to them asking about quicker refunds, they were kind enough to ensure that refunds get provisional sanctioned. The amnesty scheme got introduced to ensure that the litigations really do not travel higher ups and are got sorted out. The insurance sector, which was seeing a lot of challenges in itself, they came up and provided clarifications towards that sector. So therefore, the council has been considerate enough to the industry needs. They have acted the body with wisdom. They had acted the body with authority. And more so, what is important is it is the concept of two authorities, center and state, coming together and bringing changes so that there is absolute harmony. And I do believe that the GST Council has been responsive to the industry concern. They have time and again ensured that industry grievances are so met. Even if we go today and try approaching the GST Council, they are very forthcoming and ensure that we have sufficient ground. And if we do have them, then they take up those grounds in the agenda which they keep at the council meetings. So they are an institution, they are doing the right job, and I believe they are very important to govern this regime and take it forward.
Okay, now let's just shift our gears slightly and move to another important dimension of the GST journey, which is the GST litigation. Uh, First, I want to bring in Deepak here. Deepak, from an industry perspective, how has the nature of GST dispute evolved over the last 9 years? Are businesses dealing with the same type of issues that they were grappling with in the initial years? Or have you seen that litigation landscape has actually changed in these last 9 years?
Thanks, Ruturaj. Ruturaj, that's a very important question. The litigation landscape has certainly changed. When we started off with GST, there was obviously complete disruption. Then we had a stabilization in terms of issues, and now there is a maturity which has come into play. We all would recall that when GST was rolled out in 2017, mid 2017, a large part of the litigation was related to portal glitches and Tran 1 forms, 2A, 3B matching data, the formats were changing, and we were constantly on the run. Today, we are in a completely different situation. We are actually talking about legal interpretation, we are talking about enforcement, etc., etc. We are at the threshold where GSTAT has almost commenced, I would say, right? The expectation from the industry is that GSTAT should be a game changer. We should see a massive decompression at the High Court level. We have seen anti-profiteering cases, they have all got phased out, all those legacy disputes are going down. So, started in a different form and shape in 2017 as far as GST litigation is concerned. And now it is in a different form and shape where we are actually talking about GSTAT coming into picture.
Ranjit, you have been involved in many of these disputes from a legal side. How do you characterize the overall evaluation of GST jurisprudence thus far?
If we talk about litigation and how it has evolved or how it is seen by us professionals and industry, let's look at first the advance ruling mechanism. Okay, was immensely promising, but I think it was quite a bit of a disappointment. While there is no official sort of compilation of the number of rulings issued, the crude back of the envelope sort of estimate is anything between 5,000 to 6,000 advance rulings, appeal orders separate. Now, of those 5,000, 6,000 rulings, the conservative estimate is about 70 to 75% has been or were in favor of the revenue department. Now, that's telling, right? Here's a body, a mechanism which could have addressed issues, killed them at the inception, given clarity, certainty, and moved the entire system ahead in the form that you concentrate and focus on compliance, and you concentrate and focus on data, and then audits and assessment in a risk based approach. But that could not be. Let's take the next bit of it, is the appeals and the first appeals effectively. What we have seen is a variety of sort of experiences, right? Some guys have been so busy that they have not been able to bring into queue our appeals filed 3 and 4 years ago. Some have other priorities. Oftentimes you'll come across a prejudiced situation. Many situations where we've had hearings, re-hearings, re-hearings, and the officer is transferred once, twice, thrice. And it's unfortunate that the client then has to sort of get up and complain. We are seeing such divergence in the way things are approached. Okay, so there is a central board of indirect tax and customs mandate that we'll have our hearings online, and that's the de facto way of doing it. Whereas in the state, we have to beg, plead, and only then they'll perhaps give you a audience virtually, and that too will be in an unofficial manner conducted. Why should it be such? That's the big question that everyone has. As we are sitting with the GSTAT becoming operational, till today it's not that all 31 benches are fully operational. The principal bench has of course started functioning, but we've just about had a deadline, and that deadline was extended. We are told something like 55,000 appeals are to be filed or have been filed or will be filed in the next few days to come. But please remember that this has been after a massive and a cumbersome process that taxpayers, industry, have had to go, professionals have had to undergo before they've been able to get to this level. So it's been quite a unfortunate beginning, if I can say, in respect of the in respect of both the adjudication and the appellate phase that has happened. Given the type of issues that we are facing, in some cases classification, maybe place of supply, intermediary now of course is no longer a burning issue going forward, but nevertheless for the past there is, and similar such issues. Can we possibly have instituted a central dispute resolution authority which has a ability to provide a ruling on a topic, on a issue, on a subject, and that is then absorbed by the relevant jurisdictional appellate authority, adjudicating authority, whatever it be, to say that this is what we need to follow as a principle, as a guideline, as a position.
Yeah, the Central Authority for Dispute Resolution sounds like a really relevant concept. Before we move on, I'd like to get a quick view from actually all three of you. We've seen so many landmark judgments in GST, mostly by high courts, and also several issues which have been litigated on. If you had to name one judgment which you think has changed the GST thinking in a major way, which one would it be? Maybe we can start with Kulraj.
Ruturaj, I'll go with the first one in your list. I think the one that actually struck me was Mohit Minerals only. The court had to dwell upon whether there could be a GST levy on ocean freight in case of CIF imports, and they had that it is a dual levy. The concept of dual levy remains still and in a lot of other transactions as well. But that was one functional ruling which provided a clarity that in the GST regime, while the credits do remain, but there cannot be two levy on a single transaction. So for me, that was one a key ruling that's there.
All right. Deepak, do you have a specific judgment that you feel is really striking?
I think the most important was Philco, where Supreme Court took a very practical position. This decision, it's a historic watershed moment, as I would refer to it. Supreme Court never got into the technicalities, or they did not debate into the individual glitches, because there were multiple and maybe hundreds and probably thousands of writ petitions which were filed on this particular topic of transitional credit. They applied a very simple solution. They recognized that this is a new law which has been brought in. There are a lot of procedural difficulties which people will be facing, a lot of system related issues which people will be facing, and they ordered the GSTN to provide a uniform 2 month window to all assessees to file their revised Tran 1s. So, this judgment fundamentally established the substantive statutory right of the pre-GST semi credit, saying that it cannot be permanently destroyed just because the digital infrastructure, there's some limitation, there are some rigid deadlines, etc., etc. Technology needs to serve the law. It cannot really dictate the law.
Ranjit, do you have any landmark judgment, any personal specific judgment that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I want to talk about two judgments and not talk about it, but I think Armor Security and Radhakrishnan Industries, in my sort of assessment, are landmark and taken together. And taken together because both these have interpreted the law on procedural and jurisdictional aspects, right? Armor Security dealt with concurrent jurisdictions and the ability to summon and investigate and whatnot, whereas Radhakrishnan Industries dealt with provisional attachment and in a pre-assessment sort of situation, and they potentially can touch upon and impact every and all taxpayers. But importantly, as the law has now been laid down by the Supreme Court, what it will do is guide and direct the field formations and the taxpayers, and the entire actions that the field formations take will now have to be sort of within the corners of how both these judgments have laid down the provisions, and in fact in Armor Security has laid down some suggestions. So the landscape of how the law is actually on ground implemented, these two judgments are the beacon lights in my view, which will guide the actions for times to come.
So see, we are speaking about litigation and landmark judgments, but long before matter reaches High Court or now GSTAT, uh, it goes through adjudication. So one question, and Kulraj, maybe you can comment on this, that how do you assess has been the quality of adjudication under GST in last 9 years?
So that's one area where the ranking is pretty low, where the scorecard remains very low because uh, while we talk about one nation, one tax, it has not been one nation, one adjudication stroke audit. The authorities have behaved randomly. Uh, it was easy in that sense on the earlier regime where you had and you were aware about what would a VAT authority expect out of that an education and what would a service tax authority. Here you go and you're not really sure about what can come across, which diverse authorities seeking diverse information for an audit and coming up with absolute different conclusions, not following any high court precedent is very shocking, surprising, and disappointing at the same point of time. I would expect that the government should come up with scheme like large taxpayer unit scheme that was there in the excise regime, wherein the large taxpayers should get one window of audit adjudication. With such taxpayers having multiple registration, it is always difficult and challenge. Something of that scheme should come across. an audit mechanism should also be brought in a centralized manner so that those two aspects can be well taken care of. But
True, true. And Purval, I think many taxpayers, based on their experience, have started feeling that a real meaningful relief is really going to be available either before GST or a high court level. So, having a better first stage adjudication is really something which will help, and it will help us in having lesser amount of litigation.
yeah, that is important. And why this has happened is because the taxpayers have lost hope in the adjudication audit. And that is not the right thing. And the hope and the substance should always remain in the legislation. So I think that is somewhere the government needs to plug in into and improve on the adjudication and audit process.
So taking forward the point which Gulraj made, about one nation, one tax. So uniformity was one of the defining promises of GST, and businesses today are filing common returns, they're following common law, operating common technology, but does the same level of uniformity is extended to them at an audit level? So, Deepak, from an industry perspective, we'd really like to hear your thoughts on, do you believe that businesses, and especially like yours, where you're operating in multi jurisdiction ecosystem, so do you believe that businesses are really experiencing a one nation, one audit approach?
Ruturaj, we did witness one nation, one tax. We have to accept that. One nation, one audit? The answer is no. That's the short answer, sad part of it, but that's the reality. This is leading to a severe lack of uniformity. And God forbid, but you will also have situations where the same issue has been accepted by some states, but not accepted by other state officers. That's where the real tug of war will start. The law did try to create a single interface, but that has not happened. We probably need, if I were to look at it, a common adjudicating authority which will look at disputes which are spanning multiple states. The centralized authority could audit, it could decide the issues for all the states simultaneously rather than forcing companies to engage in litigation on multiple fronts. And that's not possible and that's not fair, right? The government needs to bring in place a mechanism where we are concentrating more on supporting businesses rather than fighting litigation, which probably will not result too much.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think this one nation, one audit experience unavailable seems to be, a true industry experience all across. Taking that thought forward, by far we've reflected on GST's journey, its achievements, its challenges, and the way it has evolved over the last 9 years. I'd like to end the discussion of this panel on a forward-looking note. So, as we look ahead, GST, what areas and particular reforms do you believe are most critical over the next, say, 3 or 5 years? What would you like to see in the GST ecosystem that would make you say that yes, GST has truly achieved its full potential? Let me begin with you, Deepak, and then Ranjit and Kulraj can share their inputs.
Sure, Ruturaj. So maybe I'll summarize what I was mentioning earlier on. If we have to unlock uh, or give further impetus to our economic growth, I think these few issues need to be tackled. Number one, while we talk about one nation, one tax, but we cannot strongly claim that when we have certain critical sectors like petroleum, electricity, etc., which are out of the core GST net. This has meant cascading taxes, input tax credit, which just sits on the balance sheet or sits into the P&L, which we are not able to utilize. So once we bring this fuel, energy, etc., into the GST net, it will be a very important critical structural reform which is currently needed to bring down the manufacturing costs across the India manufacturing sector. The other, we need to also look at kind of a green channel, right? We have customs, under customs, we have the AEO program, the authorized economic operator, where compliant businesses with a strong track record have been given a green channel. Similar should be done under GST, which would therefore mean that we get kind of automated instant ITC, and we are not hassled about arbitrary system generated scrutiny notices. We also need to move from the current structure which is there into a more cleaner tax structure, tax rate structure, which will drastically eliminate classification disputes. They have come down significantly because of 2.0, and those now is the time when over the next few years, 3 years, 5 years, we should again target that and bring that further down. Now, if we look down the road 3 to 5 years from now, I think GST will achieve its full potential when tax is just a byproduct. It's not a driver. Today, many a times we, keep noticing that businesses reach out to tax when they need to take any decisions. There are a lot of efforts, energy, hours which are being spent discussing the tax implications. Those need to come down. I mentioned some time back that we have to make sure that we are concentrating more upon businesses. And if we were to look at the last few years, we have built the structure, and now the time has come to make it run. We should now refine the structure, make the small touches and touch-ups, etc., and make sure that it is running. And businesses are being able to ensure that they are becoming a catalyst for the economic growth rather than just complying with various tax provisions.
All right. Ranjit, your views, please.
Rituraj, as we move towards a $5 trillion economy, and we have to really up our 1.9 trillion rupees monthly collection, the few sort of asks or aspects that I think are important from a reform point of view. Number one would be all our appeal authorities, whether it be the tribunal or it be the first appellate authority, should have a time bound and a sort of a perimeter given in which they should really address all disposed appeals, not sit and let them linger, and 10 years hence you have to go and defend something where you don't have the records and papers. That's one. The second is, and this is more a perception issue, is I think the advanced ruling authority, while it becomes more irrelevant, it's also important that its perception is improved. And I think there should be a overhaul in how the body really functions. Number three would be from a policy point of view. As I said, ITC on construction related activities, on immovable aspects that are created in the economy, on motor vehicle, on things like that, which today have credit barred, in my view, deserves a relook for sure. And there's no economic rationale that I can sort of come up with as to why it is denied. Okay, so that's for me important. And equally in the policy level aspect, more from a process angle, the ability to revise returns is something I think which should be made available to the taxpayers. We are, after all, a self-assessment system, and that's what the entire ethos of GST has been and is meant to be. So we should have a ability to revise, and not in the truncated manner that it is today allowed. Last, from my side, I think some issues that need to be addressed. The topmost, in my perspective, is Section 16(2)(c), the fact that your vendor supplier has paid tax to the government Why should I be made responsible? Should I be responsible for his health and well-being and his compliance? And Deepak also, alluded to this aspect being a pain point. This should be taken up. I'm not sure whether it could be through the mechanism of the court. Courts are dealing with it, or whether the council can really come in and realign the way in which this provision is applied. So those are my asks and a reform point of view.
All right. And finally, Kulraj, you have your views, please.
Because I think, and we've spoken about it, I think administration needs to really jack up. There has to be a uniform methodology for center and state jurisdiction to conduct the audits. And even post that to conduct the adjudication. They should be more than forthcoming, forward-looking. They should understand the fact that the taxpayer has multiple jurisdiction, multiple operations, and henceforth be looked into in similar fact pattern. Uh, in alternative, the government can bring up a large taxpayer unit as a mechanism. So that's what the first ask on administration could be. Uh, there needs to be, in the second ask, there needs to be a better consultation between the stakeholders and the government as far as the GST is overall concerned. Specifically, there are certain aspects which are getting impacted post GST 2.0. One is this inverted duty structure. There are accumulations on account of services which are not getting resolved, and likewise for capital goods for which refunds are not getting granted. And therefore, there is an enough and more of ITC backlog in companies which are in inversion structure. So those level of discussions and interactions should happen. And lastly, in my view, there needs to be a technological framework, but more so a trust-based technological framework. The government should try at best to loop in the gaps, but must understand that there are certain industry limitations as well. I'll give a last example to this. Let's say this current technological upgradation of mentioning of bill to ship to and mentioning of GST number in a ship to transaction. Now, in a number of times, the supplier may not really have the GST number of ship to a recipient. Now, in all the situations, the government needs to understand that while there would be certain taxpayers which would not be in the right category, but that is only 3 to 5%. But 95% of taxpayers in the honest category would want to conduct the business in right manner. And therefore, such restrictions, such limitations will only discourage the industry from putting forth future investment, from industry to put forth confidence in the government. So this aspect of a trust-based mechanism, government makes changes, more than happy and more than grateful, but those changes should be in a trust-based mechanism, not a one-sided thing, not a approach to curb revenue and to curb leakage in all situations. So I think from an administration point of view and from a technology point of view, I believe that if a trust-based mechanism, if a more cohesive mechanism is so introduced, we'll have a better GST when we talk 9 or 10 years ahead.
Wow, I think these are really valid and important points. The whole road ahead discussions, I think, is really great note to end today's session. As all of you mentioned, the GST has come a long way over the last 9 years, and the next phase is likely to be less about introducing new concepts and more about refining the existing framework. So thank you, Deepak, Ranjit, Kulraj, for sharing these valuable perspectives. I'd also like to thank all our listeners and viewers for joining us today. We hope they find this discussion insightful. This is just a beginning of our GST Day webcast series. Over the coming weeks, we'll be bringing you more conversations. So do stay tuned for upcoming webcasts. And thank you once again for joining.